Hello, beautiful people. Today is 3rd of July. My name is Sahil and welcome to Newspaper Analysis. Friends, today we'll take a quote from John Stuart Mill, one of the most influential political thinker and a philosopher of liberalism. He says, "Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing." So, friends, this particular quote means that the silence of virtue, ethics, and morals is more harmful than the noise made by evil and wickedness. Therefore, people in power should not turn a blind eye to the injustices which are happening into the system. And friends, therefore, into the context of civil services, the corruption and injustice happens the moment a bureaucrat decides to keep the eye away from the problems that are erupting into the system. So, activity happens to be a most important value for the civil services. Thus, this particular quote can be used in your GS paper number 2, GS paper number 4 ethics, as well as into the essay papers. Now, coming to the main question that I gave you yesterday. So, the question says that the rotten criminal justice system is a threat to justice for both victim and accused. Comment and suggest a reform in different pillars of criminal justice system. Also highlights legal and constitutional provisions that deal with criminal justice system. Now, guys, this question is very much scattered and open-ended, and such type of questions has been asked into the UPSC. So, you should prepare for these type of questions also. Now, first of all, let's identify that what are the areas which you need to pick up in answering. First of all, you need to show that how the rotten justice system is a threat to victim as well as to the accused. Then you need to show that how different pillars are plagued with the injustice, and then the constitutional provision and the legal provisions for the criminal justice system. Now you can start your answer by writing such that justice is the plinth on which the superstructure of democracy is erected, and if this foundation is shaky or rotten, then the entire structure of democracy will fall to the shambles. Thus, justice is a crucial element. Now, a rotten justice system is characterized by delay, and on to the end of a victim, justice delayed is equal to justice denied. Therefore, the bad justice system is like injustice. And for the accused, guys, accused doesn't always means that he had committed the crime, but he is under the suspicion. And if at the end of the day, due to the rotten justice system, it is identified that the person never committed a crime, and as an under trial he spent his entire youth or life, then it will again be a kind of an injustice. Now, guys, on to the different pillars the reforms are needed. The reform are needed into the enforcement. Here we can talk about the police reform. Then the reform are needed into the justice delivery system. Here we can talk about the judicial reforms. Moreover, certain other reforms into the investigative practices, legislative reform, etc. You can write, but then it will be too much lengthy. And here you have adequate material as I have provided you yesterday's only. Guys, then briefly, the constitutional provision as well as legal provision. So, number one, into the constitutional provision, we first of all have the preamble, then we have the fundamental rights, then we have the DPSP, which all talks about the justiciable system in both letter as well as spirit. Moreover, guys, into the legal, though you need to not write much, but you can give the reference of rule of law which is there into the criminal procedure code, Indian penal code, etc. But I say don't write more than 2 lines on that particular regard. So, guys, these are all the things which you will be writing, but here the skill is not about writing. The skill is that how within 250 words you will manage all these things, and these are the answers which make a difference, because here if you will score a little bit higher, then you will end up above average marks and you'll get an interview call. So, guys, that's it. And now let's take up the newspaper analysis. Guys, this is the today's newspaper. Let's have a overview of the paper first. So, guys, here we can see that the Ministry of Defense has approved various strategic deals with respect to the defense sector. So, we will see certain important issues here. Then, guys, Italian marine case has been mentioned. So, we'll see that what is going on. Then, guys, privatization of train has been mentioned. So, we will find a ready-made answer here. We will see this thing. Then here we can see that the current account deficit with China has dipped to $48.6 billion, which is a good development, and it happened due to vocal for local which is going on, and to the LAC tensions due to which the import has came down. However, guys, you don't need to mug up such data because it will be changing as the trade activities will resume. So that's it. Now, into the next news, we can see that there is the 12-member committee for business reforms, and onto the next page also, the Rajasthan is doing some thing. So, guys, we'll see that how we can use the both the issues into our exam. Then, guys, moving forward, here there is nothing important news with respect to the exam. Then into the editorial section, the first editorial talks about the torture culture in India. So we'll see with respect to the exam. Then, guys, here we can see the UNSC elections which have held. So certain issues will be seeing here. Then, guys, this particular article talks about the decline into the core sector. The datas have been given here, which is not important because they will be changing just into the next month. So, guys, will not be seeing, not important for our exam. Then the COVID-19 rise has been mentioned, not important for the exam. Then, guys, on to the next page. Can alternative medicines Ayurveda be subject to the modern? So, guys, we'll see the important issue involved here. Then, guys, moving on to the next page. So important news has not been there, just the regional news, COVID news has been mentioned, not important for the exam. Then, guys, banning of Chinese app has called as a digital strike. However, we have seen yesterday that what are the problems, and the day before yesterday what are the potentials of this particular move. Then, guys, moving next, we can see that onto the this page number 11, Shivalik forest has been mentioned. So we'll see what are the issues here. Then, guys, moving forward, showcase page not important, but today on the showcase page, the Yadari model or the Miyawaki technique has been mentioned. We'll see this thing with respect to our exam. Then, guys, onto the world page also, nothing important has came. Yesterday we discussed the referendum which has been passed, so already we had seen this thing. Then, guys, onto the business also, the corporate news has been given, not important for the exam. And onto the last, the Khadi footwears has been mentioned. So, guys, that's all about today's newspaper, and let's have a detailed newspaper analysis. Friends, into the recent time, there has been massive escalation at the two fronts. On one hand, there is Pakistan, and on another hand, there is the China. So there could be a possibility that if conditions turned worse, India could be involved into the two front war. Thus, there is a need to beef up the security infrastructure weaponry system, and in that particular direction, Ministry of Defense had approved a massive defense deal which includes procurement as well as upgradation of fighter jets, particularly the MiG 29 from the Russia. Then, guys, there will be the procurement of Sukhoi 30 from the Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited. And then there will also be the procurement of wide weaponry, for example, the Pinaka rocket system, which has been developed indigenously. Guys, you don't need to remember all the weaponry that we are procuring for our exam. Now, guys, into this defense deal, we can clearly see that there are the two components. On one hand, the import of the weaponry is being made particularly from the Russia, and on to the other hand, the indigenous development and the indigenous procurement is also being carried. For example, the procuring of the Sukhoi 30 from the Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited. Now, guys, government had often talked about the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan into the wake of pandemic in last 2 months. So in that particular direction, if we evaluate this defense deal, then, guys, certain trends can be noted. For example, number one, entire defense deal has not been outsourced, and there is a considerable reliance onto the Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited, which will be delivering the Sukhoi 30 aircrafts. Secondly, as a part of indigenous procurement, Ministry of Defense had said that DRDO will be making a technology transfer to the MSME sector, and they will be manufacturing much of the crucial defense equipment for the India, and for the assembly it will be given to the Hindustan Aeronauticals Limited and other public sector enterprises. So here we can see that the capacity enhancement of the MSME sector is also being carried, which will be fruitful into the times to come and will serve the Atmanirbharta needs of the India. Now, guys, if we see the focus onto the indigenous procurement, then this all thing is possible because of the change into the defense procurement policy in 2016 onto the basis of Dhirendra Singh committee, which recommended that one additional category should be added, that is by Indian IDDM, that is indigenously designed, developed and manufactured. However, friends, onto the second front, if we see the flip side of the coin, then this is also the reality that according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, India is the second largest importer of the weapons into the world and accounts to nearly 9.2% of global imports of weaponry. However, into the terms of export, India stands at 23rd position, and the major importers from India are countries such as Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and Mauritius. But guys, in terms of global trade, India's exports just constitute 0.2% of global arms. So therefore, much distance is still needs to be traveled. So guys, this is a careful analysis as what are the capabilities, what are the positive things that are being done, and what are the gaps that are still needed to be plugged. So guys, if a question comes, you can use these points. So that's all, and now we'll move to next. Guys, here we can see that an important development had happened into the Italian Marines case. Now, guys, before going into the news, I'll tell you just a background because the issue is very old. Now, the issue starts from 2012. So, here, an Italian oil tanker, Enrica Lexi, opened fire on two fishermen of Kerala, and in that incident, both of them died. So, the ship Enrica Lexi was docked in India, and when it was searched, it was found that the fire was opened by two of the marines, that was Salvatore Giron and Massimiliano Lettor, and thus they were framed of the murder charges. Now guys, the problem comes that Italy says that India does not have any jurisdiction onto this particular matter. Why? Because according to Italy, the shooting occurred 20.5 nautical mile away from the India's territory. Now guys, to understand this, please focus here. So if we take that this is up the land territory up to India, so guys, from here up to the 12 nautical mile, the zone is called as territorial water. Then the next 12 nautical mile, they are called as the contiguous zone. And guys, from the territorial water up to this thing, the next 200 nautical mile, they are called as the exclusive economic zone. By the way, friends, at many places you will also find that the exclusive economic zone starts from the coastline, but that is not true. This particular definition I have taken from the article number 55 of the UN clause treaty. So guys, it starts from the point where the territorial water ends. So beyond that, it is EEZ. Now, guys, as incident occurred outside the territorial water, so it is said that India is not having any jurisdiction onto the here, and the matter will be dealt by Italy in their own country. And they quoted the relevant articles of the United Nations Convention on the Law of Seas. But the Supreme Court challenged the Italy's position and said that according to the Indian law, we have the sovereignty and the power over the entire EEZ, that is economic exclusive zone. So therefore we are entitled. Thus, a dispute started, and ultimately, the matter went to the Permanent Court of Arbitration, which is located into the Hague, to settle into this matter. Guys, in between also there were large number of incidents happened, but we'll not go there because that will not be relevant for our exam, because the matter is very old and those things were from 2013 and 14. Now, the Permanent Court of Arbitration has now finally given the judgment and had given 2 points. Number one, they say that India does not have any jurisdiction onto the Italian Marines, and secondly, it has also ordered that Italy should pay the compensation in response to the people who have killed, in response to the damage to the property, because the ship was also destroyed. So, guys, these two developments had occurred here. Now, guys, if we talk about the implication of this particular matter, then it has been an irritant between the India and Italy relations, because in 2013 these two marines were sent back to the Italy to participate into the voting process, but then Italy refused to send them back to India, and from there a new series of confrontation also began, and the matter unfolded into very unhealthy type of way, and since then it was a thorn into the relations. And now, guys, as it has been settled into the favor of Italy, again there could be some repercussions for that particular thing. However, we just need to have an overview of this entire issue. So that's it, and now we'll move to next. Guys, if you remember, into the yesterday's newspaper we discussed the entire issue of the private train, the decision which is being taken by the Indian Railways. Now, into that particular direction, certain very good points have been given here which could directly be used into the exam. So, guys, after the decision was made, it was criticized and was said that it will hurt the interest of the poor people, vulnerable people, and will lead to the fare hike and all these kind of things. So, in exam, if a question on critical analysis comes, so we can use the first point is that 70 years have been passed since independence, but still now the state of art infrastructure in railways have not been developed. And guys, the private trains will be helping in this particular direction. After that, the second point is that Indian Railways is catering to large number of people, and in 2019-20 nearly 8.4 billion passengers were there, but still there are large number of people who cannot get their tickets confirmed and their journeys are dropped. So guys, the additional rails which will be started, it will be helping them. Then third point, onto the matters of high fares, it is said that the private trains, when they will be starting, they also need to compete with the AC bus services. So therefore it is a compulsion on them that they cannot fix the higher fares. So guys, that will also not be a problem. And now the fourth point, it was earlier being said that it will lead to the job cuts as private sector will come. But guys, please keep in mind that these are the additional trains in addition to the trains which are already running. So rather it will create more jobs as entirely new staff will be hired. And one more important point, guys, the control of the Indian Railways will be intact because 95% of trains will still be operated by the Indian Railways. So that will also not be an issue. So guys, these good points could be used into your answer. And now we'll move to next. Friends, here we can see two separate developments, but intrinsically they are connected to each other. See here, the Delhi government had formed a committee to analyze and reform the business. And in this particular news, Rajasthan is trying to speed up the ease of doing business in Rajasthan. Now, guys, what has happened into the post pandemic world? The states have seen the steep decline into their revenue collection and into the business activities, so that the states are now undertaking the reforms themselves, and a kind of a competitive federalism will now be beginning, where the states will be fighting cutthroat to attract the manufacturing, service, and other industries into their state. Now, guys, such a type of competition is good into the welfare of the entire country, as it will lead to creation of better employment opportunities, regional development will occur, infrastructure will develop, and all such associated benefits will be coming. So in that direction we can see that it is a self motivated action. But guys, there is one more side to the coin also. So we all know that into the present time the state government needs much more money, and for that they need to take the debt. But guys, there is a problem, that as the FRBM Act, that is Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, it limits that state government cannot take the debt beyond the limits that have been fixed under the FRBM Act. So guys, the state governments had appealed to the center government. Center government say that okay, we will give you a waiver under the FRBM Act and you will be allowed to raise more money if you follow certain reforms. And into those reforms, the ease of doing business was also there. So guys, this action is partially self motivated and partially it is coming from the limitation that has been imposed by the central government, but at the end of the day benefit will be of the states only. Now, guys, into that particular direction, various steps are being taken. For example, Rajasthan is constituting a separate committee which will expedite all the clearances with respect to the industrialization. Then, the Delhi government is learning from the international best practices as how the business sentiments can be improved. Moreover, guys, there is one more third dimension if you want to connect. You remember that a large number of industries are relocating from China, and these kind of things will also be attracting those industries. So into all these things we can use them as a case study. So that's all. Now we'll move to next. Now, friends, we are into the editorial section, and the first editorial talks about India's torture culture. Now, guys, into the wake of custodial deaths into the Tamil Nadu, there will be the series of articles which will be coming. If you remember, yesterday we had discussed an article, and from some additional sources also, excellently, we discussed about the police reform as well as judicial reforms which are needed into that particular direction. Now, guys, this particular article is also onto the similar lines. So we will take additional points and Supreme Court judgments from this particular article, which you can directly add into your notes onto the custodial death, as it happens to be an important topic in GS2. Now, guys, custodial deaths in India directly shows the torture culture which is prevalent into the policing and enforcement regimes. Now, this torture majorly comes from two reasons. Number one is the attitudinal problem into the enforcement agencies, which treat themselves as the yielder or the masters of power. And the second problem comes from the legislative loopholes. For example, into the terrorism related activities, particularly into the Tada Act, Pota Act, as well as Makoka Act of Maharashtra. It has been said that the confession of the accused will be admissible. So, guys, police uses torture so that the accused self confess of their crime. Now, guys, though Tada and Pota are discontinued, but the attitude which has been given by them still continues, even when there are newer upgraded technologies such as the DNA analysis, narco analysis, and the lie detector tests. Therefore, even the Supreme Court has condemned the torture in policing as a violative of Article number 21, the dignified life, under three judgments, that is the Raghuveer Singh judgment, Francis C. Mullin judgment, and the Sheila Bursi judgment. But I beg a question here, that do we actually need judgments to tell us that the torture is condemnable? Guys, India is a land of Gandhi, who was propagating ahimsa throughout his life. Moreover, India also happens to be the cradle from where two most tolerant religions of the world were born, that is the Buddhism and Jainism, and both of them holds ahimsa as the core philosophy of their teachings. Moreover, guys, India had signed in 1997 the United Nations Convention Against Torture, which provides that the country needs to institute a legal framework against torture. But, guys, here is a catch. Though India signed it but had not ratified, therefore, India is not legally bound. However, guys, into this particular direction, in 2010, Prevention of Torture Bill was passed into the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. But finally, the bill was dropped and was not carried further. Moreover, in 2016, one petition was made into the Supreme Court so that it can direct the legislature that anti-torture bill into the spirit of the UNCAT should be framed. However, guys, Supreme Court refused and said that it cannot force the legislature to bring a legislation. And, guys, it is a backtrack by the Supreme Court into the spirit of judgments which it had already passed. However, 1 year later, in 2017, the 273rd report of the Law Commission also made a draft anti torture bill. But, guys, it has also not been fructified till now. And all these things just show that how the Union Home Ministry as well as other governments are not concerned about the rights of the people who are into the custody, and it clearly violates the fundamental right, the spirit of constitution idea contains into the DPSP as well as the preamble. So, guys, these are the certain points which we can use if a question comes. So that's all. Now we'll move to next. Guys, this article talks about the India's election into the UNSC onto the non-permanent seat. Now, first of all, some basic information. United Nations Security Council is one among the six principal of organs of the United Nations, and it has the mandate of preserving the international peace and security. UNSC has 15 members, out of which 5 are permanent and 10 are the non-permanent. And India has won the election for the non-permanent seat, and the term will be of 2 years, which will begin from 1st January 2021. Guys, in order to get elected at the non-permanent seat, a person should get at least two-thirds of the votes of the General Assembly. And guys, India got 184 votes out of the total 192 votes. Further, these 10 seats are divided for different groups. For example, for Africa, there are 3 seats. For Asia, there are 2 seats. Then there is 1 seat for Eastern European countries, 2 seat for Latin American and Caribbean countries, and 2 for the Western European and other countries. So in this way, the 10 seats are divided. Now, in these recent elections, along with the India, Mexico, Ireland, Norway, and Kenya have also been elected. Now, guys, into these non-permanent seat election, there are two issues. Number one, as every bloc has a limited number of seat, the problem is not getting the two by third votes of the General Assembly. Rather, every country wants to stand unopposed and wants to get all the votes of the General Assembly. But guys, in order to stand unopposed, other competing nation has to go away their claim. Now, into this particular year, India was unopposed, and in that direction, India was helped by Afghanistan, which dropped off its own candidature, and last time it was Kazakhstan. But now, as the times are changing, every country want a stake into the UNSC. So therefore, they might not be dropping their names, and it will be hard for countries such as India to get more frequently elected into the UNSC non-permanent seat. Though this was the eighth time, but guys, a clear trend can be seen that India is now getting elected less frequently. Moreover, guys, as I told you that the countries want all the votes of the General Assembly, but the voting system is the secret ballot system. And in this year also we can see that India got only 184 out of 192. So there were 8 nations which did not voted into the favor of India, and India will never be knowing that who actually were those. Moreover, this particular election are the different from all the elections into the history. Number one, the ambassadors were allowed to enter one by one into the General Assembly Hall due to the social distancing norms, and individually they casted their ballots rather than the simultaneous votes which usually take place. And secondly, the campaigning this year was not into the physical form, it was an unconventional Zoom campaigning which was seen, and these things can become normal into the times to come, as ultimately it leads to a large cost cutting which we could used in some other protective mechanisms. Now guys, as India had adopted the non-permanent seat, there are much works which are to be done by India. Number one, India wants to pass the key legislations such as the Comprehensive Convention on International Treaty, which was floated in 1996, but till now no decision has been taken on this particular thing. Why? Because simply the definition of terrorism is not being agreed, because a terrorist for one country could be the freedom fighter for their own country. So guys, there is a problem. Moreover, there are other issues also for which India wants to vote. For example, giving the equal representation to other countries into the permanent seat. Now, first of all, why do we want to go for the permanent seat? Because guys, all the permanent members, right now there are 5, they have the veto power. It means if they want, they can just use their veto power and can drop any crucial decision. By the way, guys, out of 5 countries, the USSR is the one which has utilized its veto most number of times, and China is the one which has least utilized the veto. However, now coming back, so guys, due to the extensive veto power and because of the permanent nature, India wants the permanent seat at the UNSC. Moreover, into its campaign, India released the Norms Manifesto, which stands for the new orientation for a reformed multilateral system. So India had won the election onto the promise of the reform. So guys, therefore there are the high grounds, but actually there will might not be any development on this particular front, because in order to change the structure of the permanent members, the UN charter needs to be amended. And guys, in order to amend the UN charter, there is the necessity of 2 by 3rd votes from the General Assembly and all the votes from the permanent members. But there are twin problems. The members are against the privilege of the permanent members. So guys, there will not be two-third consensus even among the members that some extra privilege to some extra countries should be given. Moreover, why the permanent members will dilute their own powers by inviting the new members? So there will be a problem, and into the foreseeable future the expectations could be raised, but practically the things will not be coming up. Now it is being said that India is one of the responsible nation into the Asia and has always seen with high expectation. So India should work very closely and should bring the democratic order into the entire structure of the UNSC, and should take active stand onto certain practices which are worth condemning. So guys, this is all about this particular issue, and now we'll move to next. Guys, this article is a coordinated discussion which explores that whether the Ayurvedic drugs could be used along with the modern drug regime. Moreover, what could be the regulation related aspects of the Ayurvedic drugs? First of all, guys, whenever a drug for a disease is to be made, it needs to go from the clinical trials. But before going into the clinical trials, it also needs to pass the test related to the toxicity and the impacts of the desired salts. But this is for the modern and the allopathic drugs. What about the Ayurvedic drugs? So guys, there are certain elements into the Ayurveda which have proved impacts onto the human health, and there is also large textual material in support of those Ayurvedic elements, for example neem, tulsi, etc. So guys, for those elements the toxicity test might not be required, but the clinical trials, human trials, etc. are necessary before a drug is listed under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act of India to be used onto the human patients. So in a way, the process needs to be same for both Ayurveda as well as modern drugs. But guys, usually into the cases of Ayurvedic drugs, such rigorous investigation is neither carried by the producers of the Ayurvedic drug nor it is investigated by the people who are consuming the Ayurvedic drugs. Most often, onto the basis of faith into the traditional teachings, these drugs are consumed. Now, an issue comes that even a Ayurvedic element might have proved to be successful into the past, but there is no guarantee that it will be fruitful now, because into the terms of changing environment, food habits, diets, customs, a lot of physiological changes are also going on into the body. Thus regular investigation is must. Further, guys, into the terms with modern rigor, it is also often said that the Ayurveda is detached from the modern life and often doesn't uses the critical care equipment such as ventilators, pulse oximeters in their treatment, and they more rely on to the natural concoctions, due to which there could not be the desired results into the case of serious and urgent interventions. So guys, it is said that the Ayurveda is divorced with the modern science, but according to the article this is not the case. And now Ayurveda is also adopting the newer critical technologies as a part of the health intervention and treatment. So guys, they are not actually divorced. Moreover, there is a need that we should recognize an integrated path where both Ayurveda as well as modern medicines can work together in order to bring the substantial results into the well-being. Moreover, guys, such integrated approach is possible because modern drug has more of a analytical and precise approach. It focuses on separate tissues, cell, whereas Ayurveda has more of a holistic approach as it focuses on the well-being of the entire body and take interventions which show the result onto the entire human being level. So both can intervene and can give the desired results. But at the end of the day, when integration is being talked about, the issue of ethics as well as science are also needs to be kept in mind. Guys, for example, into the Patanjali's drug was shared onto the social media without publishing any clinical trial reports, ethics reports, and all these kind of things. So guys, onto the ethical consideration, Ayurvedic drugs often go for a compromise, whereas it is not the case into the modern drugs. It focuses more onto the end results. So the ethical scrutiny also needs to be steadfast into the case of Ayurvedic drugs. Moreover, guys, the reliance on science should be the most crucial factor. As the time, environment, climate, and physiology changes, the rigorous investigation by the scientific tools is also needed. So, guys, these are the important points as how the drugs are different and how they are same. So, guys, this is the all substance which is available into the article, and now we'll move to next. Guys, here we can see that the Shivalik forest, which lies into the UP, are being proposed to convert into the tiger reserve. Now, guys, if this particular project is passed, then it will be the fourth tiger reserve into the Uttar Pradesh, along with the Amangarh, Pilibhit, Dudhwa, and Lakhimpur Kheri. Now, guys, this particular thing is being done to give more space to the tigers so that they don't come in conflict with the people, and there are reduced instances of the man animal conflict which is rampant into the region. So, friends, just this brief information we need to keep in mind. We don't need to go into the other details because that is not useful. Moreover, guys, the recently the government has taken a decision that the tigers will be relocated from the Corbett National Park to the Motichur range into the Rajaji National Park. And guys, the Shivalik forest here in between will provide the suitable place for the movement of the tigers. So, guys, please remember all these places which are in UP and are suitable for the tiger. Moreover, guys, one extra information which has been provided into the article, that is recently the World Wide Fund for Nature had found the fossil of the stegodon into the Shivalik forest range. So, guys, this stegodon is an ancient species of the elephant and it has been found fossilized into a sandstone rock. So, guys, that's all, and now we'll move to next. Now, friends, here just a passing reference we need to take, that is the Japanese Miyawaki technique, which has been used into the Telangana as the Yadari model. So, guys, this Miyawaki technique involves that the native species should be planted into very close vicinity into a small land. By this, what happens? The growth of plant will be very much higher, and into very less time there will be the huge canopy, and in this way into very less cramped space large diversity and forest can be made. Moreover, guys, it not only saves the space but rather it also avoids the weed growth, as there will be no resources left for their survival when the intense competition will be given by the mainstream species. Now, guys, in the line of Miyawaki, the Telangana is had reformed this model and had named it as the Yadari model. The principle is same, but they are also using some indigenous byproducts such as the cow dung, etc. So the reformed Miyawaki or Yadari model is being used to curtail the problem of the deforestation into the state. Now, government of Telangana is using the native species such as people, murray, neem, gold shower, tamarind, and all these kind of things. So, guys, just for the exam, please keep in your mind what is this Miyawaki model and Yadari model. So that's it. Now we'll move to next. Now, as Vocal for Local campaign is going on, stands to benefit the khadi industries on two grounds. Number one, khadi for very long has been a neglected fabric of India and has not gained the much recognition. But now, as there is drying up supply of synthetic leather from China and other such countries, it gains to stand and therefore will be helping the artisans who are involved into this industry. Moreover, guys, onto the ethical considerations also are now people are marching against the ill treatment for animals, and as leather is principally sourced from the animals, so the khadi footwears will be gaining the much advantage here. And guys, if you are writing any question, just please keep in mind the name of the Khadi and Village Industries Commission under the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. So, guys, it is under this ministry and it works for the welfare of the Khadi workers and Khadi sector. So, that's all, and now we'll move to the question section. Guys, please pause the video and try to answer the question. So, the first question is with respect to the puppetry. Question number 2 is with respect to the National Investigation Agency. Please consider the correct code. Question number 3 is with respect to the second Buddha. Please consider the right statement. Question number 4 is with respect to the August offer, which you might have read into the history. Please identify the right code. Now, friends, the main question for today. The question says India has been recently elected as a non-permanent member of UNSC, owing to its contribution and capabilities to bring reform into the functioning of UNSC. Make an assessment of India's contribution to UNSC. So, guys, it is a 10 marker question and belongs to your GS paper number 2, International Organization. So, please write the answer and submit it for review. Guys, I hope you are liking the initiative. Thank you so much.